You don't have to be an artist to work with your dream images. Every mark, every image can be a living dialogue with your unconscious. In this video, we'll talk about how to listen, how to really listen deeply, and what it means to let an image speak back to you. Today, we're going to explore active imagination.
Welcome to Chiron Art Therapy. I'm Maggi Colwell, an art therapist and Jungian. Here we explore archetypal images, personal symbolism in art and dreams, and what your psyche is trying to tell you. If you're ready to dive into your inner world, you're in the right place. Subscribe, and let's begin.
I drug out some of my own artwork that you could technically do active imaginations with for just some examples of what's possible. I feel like we get a lot of preconceived notions on what's good. And I think that's a misnomer in and of itself, because there can be a lot of like personal, emotional energy and like psychic energy from a scribble. Or a lot of my artwork used to be a catharsis for me dealing with chronic pain because I had undiagnosed endometriosis for decades. So there was a lot of ugly, bloody paintings. But they were very powerful because of how I was feeling and because I was giving myself the space and the container to be able to express that without judging myself. So don't think that your images have to be fine art, artistic quality for them to be able to have useful information. So let me give you some examples of the kind of images that you could use. This one is a gel print that I made, pressing leaves down into the paint. So this is not something that I drew. But as you can see, there's a lot of like interesting layers and textures in it that you could definitely let your imagination roam with. Here is a oil pastel image that I did while I was contemplating supervision. And it doesn't have a lot of image to it, but it still has a quality to it. So if you see that one. And that's it's scribbly. It doesn't have to be fancy. And a lot of the examples from Jung's clients that we have in the picture archive and from Jung's work, like Jung was an incredible artist and he would go, "Oh, I'm not an artist," but his art was amazing. I can't offend him now. Here is a collage. So it has a lot of different elements going on in there. And I often find if I'm working with collage, what you may want to focus on as you're like getting curious and exploring into it is trying to see what strikes your interest in the background. What's in the back? What's in the shadows? What's not the object that you were focusing on? What happened by accident with the negative shapes? If you're not familiar with the term negative shape, it's the space around an object. So it's maybe the shapes that are created by the background. Let's see what a negative shape might be in here. The space in between the horse's legs where you can see the ground. This can be a negative shape, if that makes sense. The other kind that you might more typically be familiar with are painting images from dreams and actually painting figures from dreams. And Jung and his patients did a lot of that. This is a very similar kind of thing that I did yesterday, where I was just trying to explore a image that I was talking about in the dream and said I had done a drawing of and was trying to remember, but not something I actually saw in the dream. I was like talking to my partner about remembering doing a drawing of this figure. And I was like, I should probably spend some time and actually do a painting or a drawing of this figure to kind of engage actively in that process. So give you some ideas. Let me give you some definitions while we're at it. You need two things with active imagination. The first is the definition of a complex. And some of Jung's original definitions of complexes was a feeling tone image. The other way he described it is that they were also self-portraits of the instincts themselves. So how the unconscious sees it, like feeling tone images. And I think that gets it very far out of what we might talk about in common usage of what a complex is. Stop doing that. You're giving me a complex, that kind of thing. So Jung was talking about if there is a feeling or a quality, it might be in a dream, it might be just rising up in your emotionality. And if you're able to explore that feeling toned quality within you and translate it into an image, then you're giving it a form so that you can interact with it. So that through a pictorial rendition of the feeling, that you're giving it a container to form around in a way that says, this expresses what I feel. And we're not saying it like it looks like a squirrel. It might be a squirrel with the sunset surrounded by his hoard of nuts and a thunderstorm in the distance. It could be a complex vignette of images to explain the different elements of something and the dynamics going on. No right or wrong way. And I started this by showing you abstract images too, because I don't want you to get hung up on like having to create the image in your head perfectly on the paper. I think a lot of people go, I'm not an artist, or I can't do it, or proportions are hard, or drawing people is hard. And that's true. All of that is hard. But even if you want to say it was like dense or tight or had a lot of contrast to it, I'm trying to talk with my hands here, that you can express that abstractly too, or express that with collage. So that's an option. So I want to like that's the prelude. With active imagination, Jung was basically saying that what you do to do active imagination is first you relax. His consulting room was dim. He even had like sheer curtains that he would have on the over the window. So it's like a twilight place where you get into your chair and let your mind wander a little bit. So you're thinking about having a dreamy state while you're awake and looking at the image that you have in front of you. And it's not like telling a story where you have a linear storyline and thought process that you're guiding and directing. That's too ego directed. That's too conscious, too thought out, too controlled. You want to have that relaxation so that you can let the fantasy piece from your unconscious come up and inform you. The other piece of it, and let me give you an example. If there's a figure in a dream that doesn't say anything in the dream, but I'm really wondering, what part of me is this figure? And how would I interact and understand more about why this figure was in my dream? So the first thing you do is relax, let your mind wander, and then imagine that scene of the dream. Say I'm like in a high school room with three other students and the teacher in my dream. And the student in the back didn't say anything, but I wanted to be able to interact with her. So I would imagine walking into this schoolroom again and imagine being in it with the chairs and the desks and the chalkboard and setting up that situation again. And then you approach the figures and say, who are you? Or would you like to talk to me? Or what do you have to say to me? Or even, hi, I'm Maggie. Who are you? Let me introduce myself. However you wanted to start with that. And then you wait. And at least for me, the way I have thought about this is it's a listening with my body. It's holding the space of waiting as if there is a big clay jar in my torso and that I'm holding the stillness and listening. This is the difference between listening to somebody and waiting to speak. And instead of And then next in the story, blah, 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 from your head, you wait for something to stir inside of you. It might be a thought, a feeling, an idea. It's almost as if your body's responding for you. And that's why you need to be relaxed and in this kind of listening, dreamy, loose kind of a state to be able to have the unconscious images respond back. It can be flickery, it can be fleeting. This is definitely my opinion, but I've been doing this for 26 years in some of the type of work I was doing in my early 20s. Is that if it's Spielberg and just like the coolest fantasy in the whole world, there's probably too much of you in it, if that makes any sense at all. You get carried away and you like overlay too much information. Try to stick with the listening piece. And this is something that you could do as much as you want to. If I was going to do this with an image like this kind of image, I would just start to get curious about what is the quality of this, or what would this shape want to say to me? Another question would be, what part of my body would I feel this in? And then it's like, can have an imagination of, oh, it's the rising sun and it's in the top of my chest. And then imagine you having the conversation inside your body. That's a good way to ground it and continue it on. You can also do that with paint. If there's a tightness or a tingling or a heaviness or even like cold in a certain part of your body, you can imagine your consciousness in that part and say, no, hey, I'm listening to you. What's going on? What do you need to express here? It's the idea that these feeling tones live inside of our body. So if we are dialoguing with them and listening to them, then we can allow that psychic energy to move and the emotions to be released and processed instead of it causing chronic pain or issues. Mm. Jung specifically said that he could only do this by himself, that's what he needed to be able to get into that level of relaxation. Some people prefer to be around other people. One thing I would empathize, yes, is that it's different than a guided meditation. If somebody else is guiding you of what to see next, you're on the journey of their projection. You aren't engaging with your own personal unconscious. And that's the difference between having a story dialogue that you have to go from one thing to the next and like video games that are sandbox style, where you just get to explore the world and there isn't necessarily a then you have to do this task next and you get to run around and do it the way you want. So it's non-directed. So I think that's an important piece. If you were unfamiliar with meditation and relaxation in general, I think short guided meditations that kind of have that guided descent imagery, counting backwards, the spiral staircase going downward, or just a gradual relaxation would be useful, and then continue it onward. There is journeying drum beats that are also useful that help stimulate your brain to be able to do this kind of thing too. So if you don't want to do this sort of thing in complete silence, that might be an option too, to be able to stimulate your brain enough to be able to stick with it. Yeah, let's open it up for a little bit of dialogue on some of this. As you can see, I'm not guiding us through something because that's a guided meditation. It needs to be personal. Oh, my artwork doesn't do this anymore, but it would be like years and years ago, 20 years ago, in the top corner of my artwork, there was always this little scribble in like most of my art. And it would happen over and over again. And it was like a knot or scar tissue or something like that, that was like locked energy that was just kind of sitting there by itself. And sooner or later it worked its way out and I didn't continue to do that in my artwork. So you can see things like that are like kind of thematic graphic indicators of a quality, a feeling, a thematic color or squiggle or scribble or something like that shows up over and over again. And that gives you an idea of there's a complex somewhere in there. There is a fabulous article by, it's Abernathy and Wicks, that's on the image of the heart, where they talk about a repeated image of heart imagery of working with the patients that they were working with, where there was something in the image itself that's acting as a symbol and carrying that psychic energy, so that as you see it crop up over and over again, it's bringing this piece up to your consciousness again. If I was looking at that little scribble of mine, I would start to say, is there a place in my body that I feel this? Or if I was going to say there's an emotion or a mood related to this scribble, what would it be? Or if I was going to talk to this scribble, how would I describe it? For example, say, can you see this little red part in here? Like, this is the only real instance of this color. It's like here, it's here, in this whole piece. So if there's an accent mark here, and it's got a lot of tension in this little spot right here too, that makes it have more weight than all the others. So of just saying like, where do I feel this scribble? And then start to be able to talk to that scribble of what's going on here. Like, why does it feel like it's pinched or closed, or we're focusing in on this particular piece? To me, this feels like up here, it has like space and it's gentle. And then there's something here that says there's a real concentration of energy. Does that make sense? So it can be something as subtle as that. I've had clients that will have a particular like triangle shape or a break, like a Harry Potter scar, lightning bolt, line in something that like really stands out from the rest of what they do, and you like find it over and over again. And there's something there because there's a lot of like contrast and tension that's there. So you start to say like, why is this showing up? And it's curious. You want to know like, why is this thing so different than all the others? And sometimes you'll even say, hey, what do you think of this? And they're like, oh, I didn't even realize I was putting it there. That's not my favorite colors at all. With a client, a lot of times, if that's the kind of response you get, they don't want to talk about it yet. But you've also made their unconscious aware that you're looking, that you're witnessing. If it's a scab, you don't want to pick the scab, right? You want to let it heal until something, the new skin can emerge up. When it's your own stuff, your insides will, like I had a really intense bad dream working in one of my analyses, and my analyst was like, you have to confront them. And so I started imagining what that might feel like. And I'm like, this feels triggering. Like, I feel like I'm going into a trauma state. This does not feel good. And like my heart was racing. I was sweating. Like I was feeling real tense. I was like, this is bad touch. And trusting that my body was saying that that's not the way to go about it. This is not the moment to muscle through and do it anyway. This is your body saying, please care for me and be more gentle with me. And me being able to trust that. Sometimes it's, oh, I'm onto something big. Now I've got chills and this feels like intense. Like now there's something that's like tingling and feels alive, or you're on the edge of your seat. But do you see how like the edge of your seat in a roller coaster is different than I'm going into a trauma response? Right? Obviously, like, you have to like roller coasters for that analogy to work. It's like you signed up for it. What's going to happen? It's exhilarating, but not in a, I'm going to a bad place now. And that's the thing with active imagination is you get the break. You get to say, this doesn't feel right. I'm not ready for this, or I don't feel good today, or that's enough for now. And I'm going to say thank you to the unconscious for the interaction and move on to the next dream.
What can I do to help me relax into a trance state? Like relaxing music or drums or something?
Perfect example, the difference between me and my partner. My partner needs background noise to be able to concentrate. If I'm listening to something in the background, I can't read. So I can only do one thing at a time. And I need that stillness to be able to go into a focused place. But my partner needs stimulation to be able to get that focus. So if meditation music or drumming would help, absolutely do that. Insight Timer has a free version, and it has some like repetitive tracks and different types of bells. So if you wanted to do that as a way to keep time, so you're not sitting there going, has 5 minutes passed or has 2 hours passed? I don't know. That's another tool to use. And you can use a bell that feels, they even have like little wood things that go thunk instead of an actual bell, or a gong. There's a whole bunch of different ones. So if that would be a good way for you to keep time and set that container for yourself, that would be another option as well. Don't do one that has talking in it. That's going to be distracting. That's somebody else's psyche inserting into your process.
How do I trust what's coming up for me in the unconscious? It can be scary.
And that's the ego trying to control everything. The ego's a control freak and thinks that it's in charge, and it's not. If we imagine the unconscious is a big scary monster and it's going to come up like a leviathan and swallow us whole, then it's, oh, is that how you'll recognize me? And it's happy to oblige. If we imagine that the self and our inner figures are friendly and care about our process and our individuation, then they're going to be friendly. So the more that you learn to consider and trust that the figures that we can't see or that they're in the dark, that they're not the scary monster in the closet, but more the moon goddess like coming to meet us, but she can only meet us at night. That kind of a thing. For me, when I'm in that mode, doing artwork first helps because it shuts down some of my cognitive linear thinking and gets me into more of a flow state so that I can relax. So that might be an option too. It can be a figure or a scene in your dream that you want, or it could be feelings. If I have, so I'm an intuitive thinking type. So if I have a big emotion during the day, it surprises me. And I'm like, whoa, who is this? So me sitting with that feeling because it's my inferior function is like good exercise for me to be able to make space for it. Like the emotion, that's uncomfortable. So for me, a passing emotion might be a big deal because there's a lot of psychic energy there. With dreams, definitely if there's like a theme or a symbol that keeps coming up for you, then it's trying to tell you like, hey, there's something important here. However, I've had dreams like with a really big emotion in it or like a nightmare that sets up a situation that I'm like confused or curious about. And I'll just sketch out a scene of it just because I'm like, I feel like it's different. I also believe that I may see a friend and then I dream about that friend for a couple weeks after that. That doesn't mean that the friend showing up in my dream is only about me seeing my friend that week. There are other things that the dream is connecting that figure with on an internal level that has nothing to do necessarily with the literal interpretation that I just saw that friend. So I feel like there's always layers. And I'll turn this whole thing on its head now. a situation in your life, you can look at the dream. Why is this happening? Like, why was I late all week? Or what does it mean that the kitchen sink broke in my house or something like that? There can be a symbolic process for what's going on in your world. I had used this as an example recently. I live in a townhouse and I don't have any grass. I don't really have a backyard. It's like a patio. But I was sitting there one morning at dawn with my coffee in my kitchen, looking out the window, and there was this little bunny like popping around my back deck. And I'm like, oh, that's who's been eating my marigolds. But it seemed really special because like I didn't expect to have wildlife in my little concrete backyard. And it felt like a visitation. It felt special. It's like this bunny, this little, and it was young too, like this little baby bunny, and it was dawn. And here I am, like still trying to remember my dreams. It just felt like a special magic moment. And I think the more we live into the world around us, the more that we can get symbolic meaning from that too. At that time, it's been so much time since that particular thing has passed. I don't think there's a lot of psychic energy left in it, but of saying, maybe I would paint a picture of that, of Dawn and the little rabbit and the eaten marigolds, of what symbolism does that have for me? Well, why that day? What did that relate to my personal process that day? So some of this is about trusting your intuition. Like, where is the energy? Where do you want to follow that energy? It's not necessarily like these steps and everyone does it the same way. There's also that idea of, does the dream say something about the world around us and also about our inner situation as well? It's, who does that person represent in your dream? What part of you is that person? Why is that part being represented with what they have? A lot of times for me, it's a bright shadow, somebody that I'm friendly with and familiar with, and they have qualities that I don't have that would be a balancing, complementary situation for me if I was to do things more like that friend or consider my situation the way they would. Like, that was my goal, is that everybody would have something they want to go try. Oh, the other thing I wanted to say is not everybody sees a lot of images in their head. So you don't have to if that's not your way. It might be sensation. It might be a thought that feels new, or it could be emotion. So don't discount the way you process internal energy. I'm very visual, so that makes it easy for me. But even people that are not naturally visual people can get information using different senses. What if I don't remember my dreams? Can I do depth work? Does my artwork count instead? Setting an intention when you go to bed, like having a journal next to your bed and writing, I wish to remember my dreams tonight. And then when you wake up in the morning, picking up the same journal and just before you get out of bed and just trying to see what's going on in your head. Is there a song? Is there any images? Is there a mood? Is there anything in there? And just like being softly curious and like poking around before you move into action would be the way to start remembering more of your dreams. Some people don't remember dreams for physiological reasons. Some people are on medication that affect their dreams. I had surgery a couple times this year, and I chose not to write down any of my hydrocodone dreams because they were terrible. They did not feel normal. They were scary and weird, and they didn't feel like me. And I'm like, this is the spirit of hydrocodone messing me up. And I just decided, we're just going to get better. I don't need to analyze this. And I've seen that with clients who are on different kinds of psychiatric medication, clients who are on chronic pain medication. will affect your dreams. I've also seen even alcohol and marijuana. Sometimes you can see the threads of it in a dream as well, where the different shifts of the different chemicals are affecting people. So it's not just a, can I remember my dreams or not? There's a lot of different factors that go into that too. I had mentioned at some point in one of the other videos that my dad had a TIA at one point, which is a mini stroke, and he didn't remember his dreams after that. We knew he had dreams because he'd yell in his dreams in the middle of the night, but he could never remember any of them anymore. So there was something organic, biological that shifted after that he was no longer able to remember his dreams. There's a lot of reasons. And sometimes it's just because you're too busy. If you have too much going on in your waking world, there's not room for the inner world, for the unconscious. And sometimes if you're going through something big, it'll say, no, this is not a good time.
What if I don't have time to write down all of my dreams? Or if I don't want to turn on the light and really get involved with something in the middle of the night?
One of the things I do for my own dreams is I'll do talk to text on my phone.
Oh,
So as I'm like wandering around and making coffee, I'm like taking notes. I don't actually keep a paper journal because I print my dreams out because I'm pretty involved at this point. But the paper journal thing didn't work for me because there is no way I'm going to put my glasses on, turn on the light, remember how to write because I'm dyslexic. And like for me to have enough concentration to be able to write something, I have to really wake up and then I'm not going to be able to fall back asleep. But I can speak a little bit. I don't have to turn on the light. I don't have to remember how to read or put my glasses on to be able to do that. So we have a lot of tools I was hiding from the world on Saturday so that I could look at the last 6 months of my dreams. And I was plotting out the patterns of the psychic energy and reading them as if each night was a different chapter in a book of, oh, and this cropped up again. And oh, there's this again. I figured that out last year when the word restaurant had come up 40 times in a year. And there was another one that it came up with, and it was like almost that many. And it was like return or go back. The funny thing is, the etymology of the word restaurant means to return to the original origin, to the source, or to the original way, restore. So and then I turned back, or then I had to return to over and over again, actually relates to the word restaurant. And I don't think I would have been tracking return in my dreams if I hadn't run it through like a word generator to figure out how many times certain words were repeated over a certain time. But it was interesting. It was like about going back and getting something or returning to the old way. It's hard to look at trends when they don't seem related, but when you're looking at them in big chunks, then you start to see more and more patterns.
no.